The Viking discovery and settlement of Iceland. Iceland remained, for a long time, one of the world's last uninhabited larger islands, the others being New Zealand and Madagascar. It has been suggested that the land called Thule by the Greek geographer Pytheas, 4th century BC, was actually Iceland, although it seems highly unlikely considering Pytheas' description of it as an agricultural country with plenty of milk, honey, and fruit. The name is more likely to have referred to Norway, or possibly the Faroe Islands or Shetland. There is some literary evidence that monks may have settled in Iceland before the arrival of the Norsemen. The Landnámabók, Book of Settlements, written in the 1100s, mentions the presence of Irish monks, called the paper, prior to Norse settlement and states that the monks left behind Irish books, bells, and croziers, among other things. According to the same account, the Irish monks abandoned the country when the Norse arrived. The monks must have left in a hurry, for they are said to have left behind several things. On the east coast there is a small island, called Papi, the island of paper, named after them. Nadid was a Norwegian Viking who was sailing from Norway to the Faroe Islands in the 9th century. We don't have exact year of the first discovery, but it's believed to be in the second part of the 9th century. Nadid and his men lost their way and found a new land much farther towards the northwest. They had come to the east coast of Iceland. They explored the surroundings but found no signs of human habitation and soon turned back. When they were sailing away, some snow fell on the mountains and Nadid decided to give this new land a name, Snaland, meaning snowland. Gardar Svavarsson, a Swedish man, was the next Viking to sail to Iceland. He wanted to know more about the country and sailed around it and found out that it was a big island. During the winter, he stayed with his men in the northern part of the country. They had to build some houses there to live in, and ever since the place has been called Husavik, meaning house bay, and there is a village there now. The next summer Gardar finished his trip around the island and sailed away. He gave the island a new name, named it after himself and called it Gardarsholmi, meaning Gardar's Island. Floki Viljardarsson, later nicknamed Raven Floki, was a Norwegian Viking who set out to seek this new land. He took with him his family, friends and household and wanted to settle down in Gardarsholmi. On his ship he also had 3 ravens, and whenever he thought he was near land he released the ravens one by one so that they could show him the right way. The ravens always came back to the ship, but one day the 3rd raven flew forwards. Floki followed that raven and found the new land. Floki and his men settled in a fjord on the northwest part of the island. They were busy all summer building, fishing, gathering eggs and having fun, but forgot to make any hay for the winter. The following winter all their animals died of cold and hunger. Next spring Floki walked up to a top of a mountain and saw a fjord full of ice on the other side. He called the fjord Isafjordur, meaning ice fjord, and gave the country a new name, Iceland, which it has carried ever since. Floki went back to Norway a few years later. He was very bitter and talked badly of the new country, but one of his crew said the country was wonderful and full of goods. A town near Vatnsfjord is named Flokalundr, in Floki's honor. About 874, the settling of Iceland began in earnest, when Ingolfur Arnarsson, Jorleif Hrodmarsson, and their party arrived. As legend has it, Ingolfur threw overboard 2 carved pillars and pledged to settle wherever they landed. In due time, the pillars were found in current-day Reykjavik where he settled with his family. News of Ingolfur's success led about 30,000 more Norse to move to Iceland over the next 60 years. Before the long period of growth, Iceland would soon experience that the settlement had grown so large that a new legislative body was in order. The ruling chiefs, therefore, established the Althing, which is believed to be the world's oldest nationwide parliament still in existence. The period of Icelandic history from Ingolfur's landing until the establishment of the National Assembly, the Althing, in 930, is called the Age of Settlement. The lives of most of the leading settlers are chronicled in Landnámabók, the Book of Settlements, compiled in the 13th century. Most of today's Icelanders can trace their genealogies back to the pioneers mentioned in Landnámabók. The age of settlement was coinciding with the long reign of the first king of Norway, Harald Fairhair. That coinciding was not coincidental. Harald's tyranny drove many Norwegians into exile, and Iceland was a natural place for many of them to find new homes. Among the Norwegian Viking chieftains who fell afoul of King Harald was Ketil Flatnose, son of Bjorn Bune, from whom a great many of the most prominent early settlers of Iceland were descended. Ketil conquered the Hebrides at Harald's request, but then refused to pay tribute to Harald. In retaliation, Harald confiscated all of Ketil's Norwegian lands and outlawed Bjorn the Easterner, the only one of Ketil's 5 children who had remained in Norway. Ketil and his daughter, Jorunn, stayed in the Hebrides, but Bjorn and his other 3 children, son Helgi Bjolin and daughters Aud the Deep-Minded and Thorin Herna, all went to Iceland. Around the time of the first settlers, it is suspected that approximately 40% of Iceland was covered with natural birchwood forests. This percentage was quickly depleted by the new arrivals who were quick to use the material for constructing ships, homes and farmsteads. Trees that were not used for building were burnt for warmth. Within a century, it is thought that Iceland was entirely deforested. This would have consequences regarding soil arability that has lasted to the present day. When Olaf Tryggvason ascended the Norwegian throne in 995 AD, he decided to focus his efforts on converting those under his rule. To avoid war with the Norwegian king Olav, the pagan law-speaker Thorgir Thorkelson was elected to decide whether Iceland should or should not become a Christian country. Thorgir was chosen for his reputation as a reasonable man who could act as a peaceful mediator between both sides of the debate. After deliberating for 1 day and 1 night under a fur blanket, Thorgir finally concluded that Iceland should adopt a new faith. To mark the occasion, he brought his pagan idols to a waterfall and threw them in the abandonment of faith. This waterfall, Gofoss, meaning waterfall of the gods, is a popular visitor's attraction in Iceland today. The Althing decreed in the year 1000 that thenceforth Christianity would be the universal religion of Iceland, replacing the worship of the Norse gods. But many continued to worship the Viking gods in private. In order to sustain life in Iceland, it was a necessity for the early inhabitants to trade with the outside world. Whilst Iceland was abundant with certain provisions like poultry, cattle, sheep, horses, pigs and, of course, fish, the people still lacked many of life's essentials and luxuries. Trade was normally undertaken on short routes to neighboring Scandinavia and Northern Europe, as Iceland's merchants were primarily farmers and thus could not afford to spend too much time away from their major source of income. From Greenland, Icelanders would import walrus ivory, fur and skins, whilst from Byzantium, they acquired such fine things as gems, silver, jewelry and wine. England provided early Icelanders with wheat, tin, honey and barley, whilst Russia and the East Baltic region offered up amber and slaves in equal measure. Icelanders continued to trade with Europe and brought needed resources to the island throughout the Viking Age. The population of Iceland increased steadily until the outbreak of the bubonic plague in the 1300s that devastated the population on the island. But as always, the tough-natured Icelandic people recovered and today there are about 360,000 people living there. They have their own distinct culture, a thriving society, but also their own very well-preserved language that is very similar to the language the Vikings spoke. In fact, Iceland is a country that refuses to take in foreign words in their language and makes new Icelandic words for everything. An example of this is the word skateboard, which in Icelandic is called rollabretir, meaning rolling board. Iceland has stunning nature, the most spectacular sunrise I have ever seen in my life, lots of Viking history and very nice people, so it is well worth a visit. But, if you travel to Iceland, bring a warm coat, because it's fudging cold there. If you liked this presentation, please like, subscribe and share this video. And I hope to see you in the next one.